All right, so you landed that coding gig. Congrats. But now the real work begins. How do you keep those skills sharp, avoid becoming like a code dinosaur, and actually grow beyond what got you through that interview?
Yeah, it's a little bit like climbing a mountain, isn't it? You reach the summit feeling very accomplished, but then you realize there's a whole mountain range stretching out in front of you.
I like that analogy. And luckily, you have this deep dive to help you navigate that terrain. We're diving into a recent Algo Academy blog post, and it's got tons of advice on exactly that, staying sharp after you've landed the job. And I gotta say, some of this stuff is really eye-opening. It's not just the usual practice, practice, practice.
Yeah, it really goes beyond just the surface level. Like, one thing they talk about is continuous learning. It's not just about keeping up. It's about strategically choosing what to learn and how to apply it.
Okay, so they actually recommend learning a new programming language every year. I know that sounds intense.
That's a lot.
It is, but they make a really interesting point about how it forces you to think differently, to approach problems from new angles.
Yeah, it's about expanding your mental toolkit, right?
Mm.
Like each language has its own strengths and weaknesses, its
Mm.
own way of thinking about problems. By learning a new one each year, you're not just adding to your resume, you're actually rewiring your brain to become a more versatile and adaptable coder.
So if you had to pick one new language to learn this year, just to challenge yourself, what would it be? I'm kind of drawn to functional programming, maybe something like Haskell, just to really shake things up.
Oh, Haskell. Yeah, that's a great choice. It would definitely force you to think differently. I've been dabbling in Rust lately. It's been really fascinating to see how its focus on memory safety and performance influences the way you code.
Oh, Rust. I've heard so much about that. Maybe I'll have to add that to my list. But learning new languages is just one piece of the puzzle. What really resonated with me was their emphasis on finding fun ways to practice. I mean, who wants to spend all their free time just grinding leet code?
Right? It shouldn't feel like a chore. Right. They bring up open source contributions, which I think is a brilliant suggestion. It's a way to get real-world experience work on projects you're passionate about and build a portfolio that actually showcases your skills.
I love that. But I can see how it could be intimidating for someone just starting out. How do you even find the right project? And what if you just don't feel ready to contribute?
Yeah, that's a valid concern. It can definitely be overwhelming with so many projects out there. I think the key is to start small. Find a project that aligns with your interests, maybe something you use yourself, and just take some time to familiarize yourself with the code base.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Most open source communities are really welcoming to newcomers, and they're always happy to help you get started. You know, my first open source contribution was actually just a tiny documentation fix, and it felt so satisfying to see my name in the commit history.
That feeling of contributing to something bigger than yourself is definitely rewarding. And the skills you gain from working on real-world projects, collaborating with others, and navigating a large code base are invaluable. It's like a coding boot camp, but you get to choose the curriculum.
Okay, so we've talked about continuous learning and fun ways to practice. Now, Algo Academy gets into something that might make some folks groan: data structures and algorithms. We're past the interview stage, so why should we still care about this stuff?
That's where things get really interesting. They argue that mastering data structures and algorithms isn't just about passing interviews, it's about becoming a fundamentally better coder.
Yeah.
It's like understanding the building blocks of software, the foundation upon which everything else is built.
Yeah, I get that. But they go even further, suggesting that you actually implement these data structures from scratch, like linked lists, trees, all that stuff. Isn't that a bit overkill?
It might sound extreme, but it's about deepening your understanding. It's like building a car engine from individual parts. You know, you might be able to drive a car without knowing how the engine works, but imagine the insights you gain when you actually build it yourself. You start to see the elegance, the efficiency, the sheer brilliance behind these fundamental concepts.
You know, it's like you're saying, but actually building these data structures yourself, you're not just memorizing how they work, you're truly internalizing the logic behind them.
Exactly. And that kind of deep understanding makes you a more efficient and intuitive coder. You start to see the connections between different concepts, and you're better equipped to solve those really complex problems.
It's like the difference between following a recipe and actually understanding the chemistry of baking.
Mm.
You can follow instructions, but if you really know why certain ingredients work together, then you can start to adapt and improvise with confidence. Okay, so Algo Academy has convinced us that data structures and algorithms are still super relevant even after we've landed the job. What's next on their list of must-have skills?
Well, they spent a good chunk of time talking about code quality. It's something that's often overlooked, especially when you're
Oh.
first starting out. You're so focused on getting things to work that you don't always pay attention to how you're writing the code.
Yeah, it's like that saying, If it looks stupid but it works, it ain't stupid. But in the long run, that messy code can come back to bite you, right?
Absolutely. They make a great point about how clean code isn't just about aesthetics. It's about making your code easier to read, understand, and maintain.
It's like the difference between a well-organized kitchen and one where everything is just thrown in haphazardly. Sure, you can still cook in both, but one is going to be a lot more stressful and a lot more prone to accidents.
Exactly. And when you're working on a team, clean code becomes even more crucial. It allows others to quickly understand your code, collaborate effectively, and make changes without introducing new bugs.
So what are some concrete steps we can take to actually improve our code quality? Algo Academy mentions refactoring, which can feel like kind of a daunting task.
Yeah, refactoring is essentially the process of restructuring existing code without changing its external behavior. So it's about improving the internal design, making it more readable, efficient, and maintainable. And while it can be a bit time-consuming, Algo Academy actually frames it as a learning opportunity.
That's an interesting perspective. I usually see refactoring as more of a chore, like cleaning up somebody else's mess. But how can it be a learning experience?
Well, when you refactor code, you're forced to really analyze it, understand how it works, and identify areas for improvement. You're essentially critiquing your own work, or maybe the work of someone who came before you, and that process can be incredibly insightful.
It's like looking back at your old writing and realizing how much you've grown as a writer. You can see the flaws, the awkward phrasing, the areas where you could have been more concise or impactful. And by revising and refining your work, you actually improve your skills.
That's a great analogy. And just like with writing, the more you practice refactoring, the better you become at writing clean, efficient, and maintainable code right from the start.
Okay, I'm starting to see the value in refactoring. But let's be real, keeping up with code quality, learning new languages, A&D, finding time for those fun side projects, it's a lot to juggle. And then Algo Academy throws another curveball at us, expanding our technical toolkit.
Right. They encourage us to explore areas beyond our immediate specialization, even dipping our toes into fields like DevOps and cloud technologies.
Hold on, for those of us who aren't super familiar with DevOps, can you break that down a bit? What exactly is it and why should we care, even if we're not aspiring DevOps engineers?
Sure. DevOps is essentially a set of practices and tools that aim to automate and integrate the work of software development and IT operations. It's about breaking down silos between teams, streamlining the development process, and delivering software faster and more reliably.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture, but how does understanding DevOps benefit me if I'm primarily a coder?
Well, even if you're not directly involved in DevOps, having even a basic understanding of its principles can make you a more valuable team member. You'll be able to better collaborate with DevOps engineers, understand the deployment process, and write code that's more easily deployable and scalable.
It's like being a chef who also understands the logistics of running a restaurant. You can cook a great meal, but if you don't know how to get the food to the customers efficiently, it doesn't matter how good it tastes.
That's a great way to put it. And the same goes for cloud technologies. Having a basic understanding of how cloud platforms work, how to deploy applications to the cloud, and how to manage cloud resources can give you a significant advantage in today's tech landscape.
So it's not just about specializing in one narrow area, it's about broadening our horizons and understanding how all these different pieces of the tech puzzle fit together.
Exactly. It's about becoming a more well-rounded developer, someone who can see the bigger picture and contribute to projects on multiple levels.
I love that. It's like they're saying, don't just be a code monkey, be a code ninja. But speaking of challenges, Algo Academy gets into something that I think a lot of coders struggle with, problem-solving skills.
They make a great point about how coding is fundamentally about problem solving. It's not just about knowing the syntax of a language. It's about being able to analyze a problem, break it down into smaller steps, and develop a logical solution.
And those skills are transferable to so many other areas of life too, right? It's like they're saying that coding can actually make you a better thinker, a more analytical and resourceful problem solver in general.
Absolutely. They even suggest practicing system design, which is essentially the process of designing the architecture of a complex system. They encourage us to think about how we would design familiar applications like a URL shortener or a social media platform or even a ride-sharing app.
That sounds like a fun challenge. It's like they're saying, okay, you think you're so smart, try designing the next Uber or TikTok.
Yeah, it's a thought-provoking exercise that forces you to think about scalability, efficiency, user experience, and all the other factors that go into building a complex system.
Yeah.
And those skills are incredibly valuable, not just for coding, but for any field that requires problem solving and critical thinking.
It's like they're saying, don't just build apps, understand the systems that make them possible, which actually leads perfectly into their next point about best practices. Now, I know that can sound a bit dry, but stick with me because this is where it gets juicy.
Yeah, it's easy to dismiss best practices as just, rules or conventions, but Algo Academy really emphasizes that they're more like guidelines for writing clear, maintainable, and efficient code.
It's like learning the rules of grammar and punctuation. Once you have a solid grasp of the fundamentals, you can start to bend or even break those rules intentionally for stylistic effect.
Exactly. But you need to know why you're deviating from the norm and what impact it'll have on your code. Algo Academy highlights some key areas like code style and formatting, and they even mention specific style guides for different languages, which I thought was really helpful.
Yeah. I've definitely been guilty of neglecting code style in the past, especially when I'm just like rushing to get a project done. But I've learned the hard way that taking those extra few minutes to format your code properly can save you a lot of headaches down the road.
It's all about making your code accessible, not just to the computer, but to other humans who might need to read or modify it in the future. And let's not forget about security best practices. Algo Academy reminds us that security is everyone's responsibility, not just the dedicated security team.
Yeah, they even give a non-technical example of a common vulnerability called SQL injection, which I thought was a clever way to illustrate the point without getting too bogged down in technical jargon.
Right. It's a reminder that security should be baked into every stage of the development process, not just tacked on as an afterthought.
Mm.
And speaking of things that are often overlooked, Algo Academy brings up the importance of soft skills, which I think is something that's near and dear to both of our hearts.
Yes. Finally, something I can really sink my teeth into. It's so refreshing to see a technical resource acknowledge that coding isn't just about technical prowess. It's also about communication, collaboration, and all those messy human elements that make projects succeed or fail.
Yeah, they highlight communication as being absolutely essential, especially when you're working on a team or explaining technical concepts to non-technical stakeholders.
Oh, think about a time when you were frustrated by someone who couldn't explain something clearly, even though they obviously knew what they were talking about. Now imagine that happening in a coding project where clear communication is vital for avoiding costly mistakes and delays.
It's a recipe for disaster. Being able to articulate your ideas concisely and effectively is a superpower in the tech world. And it's not just about speaking, it's also about listening actively, seeking feedback, and being open to different perspectives.
And Algo Academy makes a great point about how collaboration can actually spark creativity and lead to better solutions. It's like that saying, two heads are better than one, but in this case, it's more like a team of diverse minds is better than a solo genius. But sometimes you do need to retreat into your own coding cave, and that's where their advice on sharing knowledge comes in.
All right. They playfully suggest starting a blog or a YouTube channel, but they also acknowledge that even something as simple as explaining a concept to a rubber duck can be beneficial.
The rubber duck debugging method. I love it. It's such a classic for a reason. But on a more serious note, I think there's a lot of value in teaching, even if it's just to an inanimate object.
Yeah, it forces you to clarify your thoughts,
Yeah.
organize your knowledge, and identify any gaps in your understanding. And Algo Academy also touches on the benefits of mentoring, which I think is something that's often overlooked as a learning opportunity.
I couldn't agree more. I've learned so much from mentoring others. It's amazing how the act of explaining something to someone else can suddenly make you see it in a whole new light.
Yeah, it's like you're seeing the concept through their eyes, and that fresh perspective can be incredibly insightful. And of course, mentoring is also a great way to develop leadership skills, which are always in demand in the tech world. Okay, ready for the final frontier?
Hit me with it.
Algo Academy dives into the increasingly relevant world of AI and coding assistants.
Ah, yes. The elephant in the room. Are robots coming for our coding jobs?
Well, Algo Academy frames it more as a collaboration than a competition. They see AI and coding assistants as tools that can augment our skills, not replace them.
I love how they use Algo Academy itself as an example, using AI for personalized learning. It's like having a custom-tailored study plan that adapts to your strengths and weaknesses, which is something that traditional coding courses often struggle to do.
It's fascinating to see how AI is being used to personalize the learning experience and make it more efficient and engaging. And of course, AI coding assistants are becoming increasingly sophisticated, helping us write better code, catch potential errors, and even suggest improvements.
It's like having a super smart pair programmer right there in your IDE. But ultimately, it's still up to us humans to guide the process, make the decisions, and ensure that the code we're creating is ethical and aligned with our values.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from continuous learning and fun practice methods to the importance of code quality soft skills and even the evolving role of AI in the coding world.
It's been an incredible journey through the Algo Academy blog post, and I have to say, I'm feeling pretty inspired to level up my coding game even further.
Me too. And I think the key takeaway here is that staying sharp is an ongoing process, a journey without a final destination. It's about embracing the challenge, staying curious, and never stopping learning.
Algo Academy ends our post with this beautiful statement: coding is a lifelong journey. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with this question. What part of this journey excites you the most right now? What will you explore further?
And remember, you're not alone on this path. There's a vibrant community of passionate coders out there ready to support you, learn from you, and share in the joy of building amazing things.
So keep coding, keep learning, and keep sharing your journey with the world. We'll catch you on our next deep dive.